Jennifer, I just looked out at the little screen I have below the desk here and I just see hearts flying. Thank you so much to everybody for spamming those hearts. That
Yes.
is how we are paid and fed. And I'm looking particularly a little too well fed lately, getting back into the jogging game because my ass has been doing too much seat time. Jennifer, I was able to sit down virtually with Elise Barrett today. She's been on the show before, talked to us about COVID, and we had a wonderful conversation. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and roll the COVID update.
Okay.
Hello, Elise. How are you doing this afternoon?
Hi, we're doing good over here. How about you?
Elise, I'm doing very well. Thank you so much. And thank you for coming back on the show. Let's do a COVID update.
Well, we've got a lot to update. First of all, I know we've all heard a lot about phase two, phase three. We've probably heard in the news that some counties in Washington state will be moving back into phase two pretty soon. To give a little update on that, what happens is we determine that according to how many cases per the population and how many hospitalizations per the population. So as the number of cases rise in an area, we're going to see an increase in hospitalizations. And as a dangerous strain, which we'll get more into a little bit later, circulates among the population, we'll start to see hospitalizations from illness rise. So in King County, we seem to be we've either crossed the line or we haven't yet. And we won't know until Monday, because on Monday the 12th, they will actually tally up the totals and decide if we actually have a handle on this thing. We know that there are some areas in Washington that are definitely going to have to move back into phase two just because of the prevalence in the community and the risk to the members of the community. This actually tends to echo not the density of population, which you might think because King County, Seattle, there's a lot of people here, or the economic income of the area either. What we've seen a lot is that areas that have dispersed communities that are more focused on manual labor, on community in one spot, and families that cohabitate intergenerationally, we see a greater likelihood of spread. So King County does have within its grasp the ability to stay ahead of the spread, at least until the vaccine really kicks in. And at this point, we have 1 in 4 adults in Washington vaccinated, which is actually pretty good considering that we've had sort of a slow rollout. And I know that everybody's heard that on the 15th, you will be able to get your vaccines age 16 and over. If you manage to get your hand on a vaccination slot, go ahead and get it. Don't worry too much about which shot it is, because the best shot for you in the moment is the one that's closest to your arm.
Something that's interesting, the B117 variant out of the UK is becoming the dominant variant now in the United States. And what I understand, Elise, is that the number of cases that we're seeing is in a younger population, in part because a lot of the younger population isn't vaccinated. They are more likely to be out and about. And the B117 variant, the UK variant, the Brazil variant, all target younger adults.
Unfortunately, this is part of the problem with an eternally mutating virus. Every time it passes from one person to the next, there is a significant chance that it will pick up a mutation that's useful to it. It is always mutating, but not every mutation will benefit it. Unfortunately, this time around, the B117 variant has picked up some very useful mutations that allow it to not only be more transmissible, but also potentially a lot more deadly. It's also given it a little bit of resistance to our mRNA vaccines and also to our Johnson & Johnson vaccine. But what we're seeing is that we are actually in a race. If we can prevent this from jumping from person to person long enough that it can't mutate something useful to it, or what we call vaccine escape, if we can stay ahead of that by manually preventing that transmission by staying a little further away from each other, wearing masks in public, and not giving each other COVID, then we can arrest that spread and that mutation long enough to really get a handle on it. And ultimately, if we don't get a handle on it, we're going to have to keep getting different vaccines, because we're going to have to hand tailor these mRNA vaccines to each variant as we go. And you're noticing that you may not be hearing as much in the news about the South African variant. That's because the South African variant is highly susceptible to the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which means that all they have to do is just go give everybody the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, one shot, 2 weeks later, everybody's immune, and you can't really spread it any further.
And we saw this paralleled with the flu this year. King County Public Health announced no flu deaths for the first time since they have tracked flu deaths. That is in part because the flu wasn't able to escape the vaccine because there was not wide community spread this year.
That's true. It's actually really exciting. Having worked in critical care and seen a lot of patients suffer terrible outcomes because of the flu in the past, the knowledge of no flu deaths in King County is a really big deal. And even bigger than that is that the impact of this may continue for the next few years. What we saw is that without the opportunity to jump from person to person, pick up point shift mutations, we've got a lot better control over and a lot better look at what the mutations are going to look like for next year. So the next flu vaccine is likely to be a lot more effective, and we don't have to worry about it jumping all over the place and becoming more and more mutated.
We were, for the most part, not in contact with each other. Kids weren't in school. College was taught remotely. People generally worked remotely in jobs if they could work remotely. Nursing homes and long-term care facilities, they spent most of the year locked down. All of this contributed to preventing the spread of flu, not to mention masks are even more effective against the flu than they are against COVID.
Flu viruses are significantly larger than the coronavirus. Additionally, once again, going back to vaccines, in the US, we actually had by far the greatest number of vaccinated individuals for the flu since we've started vaccinating. It's been above and beyond. We really got out ahead of it and interrupted it. So what we know is that vaccines work, masks work, keeping our distance from each other is actually pretty effective. And if we manage to use two of those effectively, then maybe we won't have to use the third one quite so much.
In Washington State, particularly Western Washington, it certainly isn't all bad news. As we talked about earlier, King County may be on the brink of having to go back off of phase 3. I know Pierce County is well over the line for phase 3. But if we look at other states, there are now 5 states that represent almost half of the COVID cases in the United States. In no particular order: Michigan, Florida, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and New York.
Yeah, what we're seeing is that a lot of these states that have a high prevalence, there's not really a sharp divide between them. This is not a red state, blue state thing. This is simply, here's where the population centers are, and here's, unfortunately, where B117 has chosen to emerge. We're seeing increasing numbers of B117 also in California, so we fully expect California to join the ranks of the top 5 pretty soon.
Biden administration set a target of 100 million vaccinations in the first 100 days. They blew past that goal a couple of weeks ago. They've now moved it to 200 vaccinations within the first 100 days. Do you think that they will achieve that goal? And how do we move people that are on the fence? I know there's some people, Elise, they're just not going to get the vaccine. There's nothing you can do to convince them. What about the people that are on the fence? How do we move them over the line?
First of all, in answer to your first question, I think it's very possible as long as we're able to organize correctly. I know that some of the big FEMA sites, especially the one out in Yakima, are set up for an unbelievable volume of vaccines. In fact, if anybody is really struggling to find themselves a vaccine opening and is able to drive out to Yakima, they currently have openings enough that they're even taking people that don't have appointments. As far as convincing people to get the shot, I know vaccines are a pretty hot debate right now online, especially. It's the same places you can go to read comment sections and find out about how the world is flat. You can also go to hear that COVID was all made up and Bill Gates invented the vaccine to improve our Wi-Fi access or something. I think as more people get the shot and start to understand, it's not as scary as all that, that's going to help. And a lot of the biggest thing we can do to help the people around us get the shot is to get the shot ourselves. Be really open about it. Be very straightforward. You can take your, shot selfie, your vaccine, what do they call it? Your vaccine selfie. And you can post it on social media, but you can also talk about what you experience afterwards. Say, I had a day where I just felt really blah. And then the next day I was back to my normal self. And that helps people a lot.
Elise, thank you so much for the COVID update. And we look forward to having you on the show again. Great interview, Jennifer.
Yes, she's amazing to talk to. So articulate, wealth of knowledge. But I think she makes some interesting kind of points or revelations about parts of King County and even Pierce County needing to go back to phase 2 because of the ramp up of the spread. I know on the UW campus, we've seen a 4th wave of coronavirus cases in Greek Row. And so it's not over yet. It's great that we have 1 in 4 people getting vaccinated, adults getting vaccinated, but there's still a lot of people that aren't vaccinated. And they're out there in phase 3. It looks pretty normal to me where I'm at. I'm in the university district, and it's pretty crowded in most places. And this stuff is going to continue to spread until we get a handle on it.
Yesterday, drove back from Bellevue back to Kirkland. at 4:05, right around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and the operative word was shit show. It was like 18 months ago.
Yeah.
It was stop and go, and all of the places it would be stop and go at 2 in the afternoon, and no accident, no construction. It was just volume. Everything I'm reading, Jennifer, and I risk speculating. So I'm only speculating. I'm not saying it's my opinion, but it kind of looks like Pierce County in particular is boned based on their numbers and the reports that I'm seeing. I know that one of the affiliate stations had a headline like phase 3 slipping away in Pierce County.
Yeah. I think we're probably in King County, not far behind it. Yeah, I've noticed the traffic increase too, because I get up at like 5:30 and go feed my horse in Renton and then drive back to Seattle. And even by the time I'm on, I-5 to Renton at like 5:45, 6 o'clock, coming back towards Seattle is already like gridlocked. So yeah, traffic is definitely back to normal.
Yeah, it most certainly is. And we will continue to monitor this story. I'm sure that we will have an update on Monday. Yeah. Elise, thank you so much for that. And we're going to do a little pause for the cause, and we're going to be back with our next story.
Okay.
Hi, Malcontents. I'm David, the Malcontent, and I'd like to talk to you for a moment about supporting independent media. When you support us, you help us bring the before, during, and after. You help us defend the First Amendment. You help us amplify BIPOC and LGBTQIA voices, and you help us hold leaderships at a local, state, and federal level accountable. None of this would be possible without support by viewers just like you. When you become a patron for as little as $5 a month, you help buy technology, safety equipment, and help cover travel expenses so that we can continue to bring you news that you trust. If you can't become a patron, you can do a one-time donation on Venmo, and your dollars will go to the exact same causes. With your continued support, we can continue to amplify BIPOC and LGBTQIA voices while showing the truth on what is happening in the world around us. Once again, thank you.